Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Page of USA Today, sitting in for Diane Rehm. She'll be back on Monday. The Senate confirms Loretta Lynch to lead the Justice Department. Former CIA Director David Petraeus is sentenced for leaking secrets, and the FBI arrests Islamic State supporters in Minnesota. Joining me for the domestic hour of our Friday News Roundup, Karen Tumulty of The Washington Post, Domenico Montanaro of NPR, and Christina Bellantoni of Roll Call. You can see our panel. We'll be live streaming on our website, drshow.org. You can call us with a question or a comment, 1-800-433-8850. Send us an email or find us on Facebook or Twitter. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great
Thanks
to be here.
Karen, finally, Loretta Lynch gets confirmed. Why did this happen after all those months of delay?
Yes, after 5 months, and the vote was not even all that close, 56-43, with 10 Republicans voting for her, one of them being Mitch McConnell. Basically, this had been on hold for a couple of reasons. And originally because it got all entangled in the immigration debate. During her confirmation hearing, she said she supported the president's executive order. So that took a while, but ultimately it came down to a second sort of smaller and unrelated controversy over a human trafficking bill and whether federal funds could be used in connection with that for abortion. So ultimately, I think the Republicans decided that dragging out this fight was not in their interest, even though only 10 of them voted for her confirmation, 20 of them voted to let it proceed. And even people like Jeb Bush, who is running for their presidential nomination, said, look, guys, the president deserves to have any president deserves to have his own team in place.
Well, after this battle, the longest confirmation battle than the past 7 attorney general combined, the White House liked to point that out, Christina. Tell us about the Republicans who ended up voting for her.
Well, of course, they're names that you should be familiar with for the next year and a half because they are the most vulnerable senators. In states that Barack Obama won not just once, but twice, they are up for re-election. Kelly Ayotte is at the top of that. Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, Mark Kirk from Illinois, Rob Portman from Ohio, among the others. And they are all saying, well, we're only voting for her because it's a chance to turn the page from Eric Holder, who had been the top Republican sort of boogeyman for the last few years. And that gives a lot of ability for the GOP to shift to make Hillary Clinton the boogeyman once again.
And a couple of Republicans from states with big African-American populations also.
Absolutely. So Thad Cochran among them, he was able to actually pull out a runoff Senate victory when everybody had written him off in part because of support from African Americans.
So Domenico, tell us what she's going to be confronted with right off the bat. She may take office as early as Monday, and we have seen in Baltimore and elsewhere these cases of police violence against unarmed Black men.
Right. And, these kinds of cases continue to crop up. And it's something that, of course, her Justice Department, as well as Eric Holder's Justice Department beforehand, I think you'll expect a very similar, push to kind of see, what exactly has been going on. I mean, when you have President Obama, he sets the tone with the kinds of civil rights cases they want to take a look at. It's a delicate balancing act politically for them because they have to figure out, what the facts are, as well as, trying to pacify some of the potentially problematic instances that have occurred.
And Karen, you mentioned that immigration was the first issue that kind of tangled up Loretta Lynch's confirmation. What will she face there? Will there be early decisions she'll need to be making?
Well, there are all kinds of decisions on the implementation of this executive order that are coming up. Every move brings a very sharp reaction from the Republicans who insist that this is a huge overreach of executive power.
Christina, the other issue was this sex trafficking bill, which had enormously broad support and yet became ensnared in a dispute over abortion. How did they finally resolve that so that bill could go forward and that the confirmation vote on Loretta Lynch could proceed?
It's so complicated. I'm not sure I can explain it clearly. Essentially, they were able to split the funding into 2 places, so sort of protecting what's called the Hyde Amendment, which is sort of the standard in place saying that you won't use taxpayer dollars to fund abortions, and then splitting it so that one channel would fund the human trafficking bill and then the other channel McConnell would go into this other bucket that also would not support abortion. So it became this very bizarre issue that doesn't really apply to people's everyday lives, doesn't apply to a lot of the things the Senate does every day, but gave social conservatives yet another reason to fight with the Democrats on an issue that gets voters to the polls.
So is this a sign that Congress is finally beginning to get things done? We've had a couple places where actually action has happened, and sometimes in bipartisan ways.
I guess, although you look at the human trafficking bill, and there was all this, debate about it for a month, and they wind up passing it 99 to nothing, right? It's just, and it seems like that's the kind of grind that Congress winds up being. There have been some bipartisan shoots, I guess you could say. A lot of it comes from the committee level, where I think some of the committee chairs do get along. Of course, Republicans and Democrats disagree on why this is happening. Of course, Republicans, were on the floor yesterday touting that they've been, putting more amendments on the docket so that people can, vote on what they want, and they have more open process. And Democrats say, well, we're actually more willing to work with them. They weren't willing to work with us. Remember those record filibusters? Nothing's changed. So, the big things, though, will the big things get done? And that's probably unlikely.
And I think there's a lot of pressure on Mitch McConnell, just basically to prove that Republicans can govern. But there was also another development on the Hill where the Senate Finance Committee gave President Obama so-called fast-track authority to negotiate trade deals. And that's interesting because I'm sure the Republicans love that one, because that's throwing an issue out there that divides the Democrats.
And in fact, we saw President Obama go to Organizing for Action, the advocacy group that stems from his 2008 campaign, where there's surely a lot of opposition to these trade deals, Christina, but he was arguing they're important. Will many Democrats be with them? We've seen Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren all say they're against them.
Well, it gives the president an opportunity to establish a legacy. And he has made clear that he would like the economy to be one of those things in a legacy. And the White House fundamentally believes this will help the economy and that the Republicans will actually not have anything to complain with him about. But it's a long road, and they always find a way to criticize something that he's doing. So I wouldn't say that it's that easy. And Karen's exactly right. It does split the Democrats on this, because the furthest left wings of the party are opposed to it. Then you've got Democrats like Tim Ryan or others who are working on this to come up with some sort of bipartisan compromise. But the Republicans are even acknowledging, like, what's up is down. Like, you don't normally hear us praising President Obama here, but we're going to go for it as they work out the particulars.
Well, and most notably, the person who's most split on this apparently with herself is Hillary Clinton, because, she's been on both sides of the trade issue, frankly. I mean, she and her statement this week was very hedging that the campaign put out. And then she kind of went there and said, well, look, it has to raise wages, and it has to be, it has to have national security in mind. Yet she had called TPP the gold standard when she was Secretary of State So, and meanwhile, I think it was pretty funny that in 2007, in an interview with Karen, in fact, and in 2000, she had said that NAFTA had been inherited by her husband. And, so the irony here is that she may wind up, because of some of the delays built in, if she becomes president, she's somebody who's maybe inheriting TPP. And will she sign it? I think most people think she probably will.
Karen, tell us about that 2007 interview. It's interesting because I guess it shows how sometimes the position any candidate takes, not just Hillary Clinton takes while he or she is campaigning, can be different from what they're saying when they're in office.
That's right. This big North American free trade agreement fight in the early 1990s was really very much a hallmark of Bill Clinton's presidency. He went to the mat. He fought congressional leaders of his own party. He rounded up a lot of Republican votes to get this. So again, for her to suggest that this was just something that had been, had been left behind by the previous administration was wrong. It was, in fact, very much free trade was very much a part of his legacy as a quote unquote new Democrat. So, but by the time she ran, the politics on this issue had shifted quite a bit, and she was looking at challenges from her left, as she does now.
Does she really have the option, though, of opposing it, given she was such a strong advocate for it when she was in the Obama administration?
I think she probably hopes it just sort of goes away because she doesn't have very strong opposition this time. I mean, the irony is that Barack Obama, who ran to her left last time and was sending mailers out in Ohio about how bad she was on NAFTA, is the biggest proponent of trade now. Now, he makes a much more nuanced argument, which is something that I think she would make too, about environmental standard and wages being this. He called this the most progressive trade deal that's ever been crafted, and called it, he said that it made fixes from NAFTA. So, I think she has some luxury and some room, given that Jim Webb, Martin O'Malley, and Bernie Sanders aren't Barack Obama.
We're joined this hour by Domenico Montanaro. He's the lead editor for politics and digital audience at NPR. By Christina Bellantoni, she's editor-in-chief of Roll Call. And by Karen Tumulty, now political reporter with the Washington Post. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that sentencing agreement with David Petraeus and other issues. We'll take your calls and questions. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Susan Page of USA Today, sitting in for Diane Rehm. With me in the studio for the first hour of our Friday news wrap, Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post, Domenico Montanaro of NPR, Christina Bellantoni of Roll Call. And you can see all of our guests on our live video stream. It's at drshow.org. You can send us a question by email, post it on Twitter. You can call our toll-free line, 1-800-433-8850. Well, before the break, we were talking about the challenge for Hillary Clinton when it comes to this Pacific Trade pact that's being negotiated that's divided Democrats. She's got some other issues that have come up this week that have the potential to be troublesome, Christina. One of them is